In the previous episode, we went into, some of the foundational things regarding Orphism. And within this episode, I want to go deeper into Dionysus within the context of Orphism itself. Yet before delving deeper into the mysteries of Dionysus, it is crucial to highlight the ancient concept of the underworld being equated with the night sky. In this understanding, the sun and moon were identified with Hades and Persephone, while the zodiac and the Milky Way were seen as the paths or rivers of the underworld. And this notion can be traced back to Plato and earlier Ionian sources. And Orphic initiates who had absolved themselves of the original sin associated with the Titan's murder of Dionysus, Persephone's son, were bestowed with the title Children of the Moon, owing to Persephone's connection with the moon. And from a Jungian perspective, the moon symbolizes the anima. And within this context, Dionysus, using Greek terms, embodies a heliocotonic hero nature. And this is evident in the appellation used in the mystery schools referring to Dionysus Zagreus. And this identification is mirrored in the magical papyri, where Abrasax combines Helios and Typhon. These texts also frequently name them individually. And when exploring the chthonic and solar aspects of Dionysus, they coalesce to form Iahus or Bacchus, with Zagreus being the son of chthonic Zeus, who was begotten in the form of a dragon or serpent upon Kore or Persephone. And some consider her identical with Ceres or Demeter, while others see her as her daughter. Zagreus being characterized as a potent and divine entity associated with the mysteries of life and death. Referred to as the firstborn Dionysus, Zagreus is depicted as a god presiding over both the underworld and the heavens. The divine child, an embodiment or manifestation of Zeus, was known as Dionysus Zagreus, destined for universal rule and the establishment of a realm of happiness. However, at the prompting of Hera, the Titans conspired to slay him. According to the myth, when Zagreus was born, he was concealed from the other gods to shield him from the Titans' envy of divine power. Despite these efforts, the Titans discovered Zagreus and ruthlessly tore him apart, consuming his flesh and leaving only his heart behind. Yet, Zagreus' heart was salvaged and given to Zeus, who implanted it in his thigh, leading to his self-impregnation. Dionysus, the resultant child, emerged from the body of Zeus, with Dionysus representing the celestial aspect and Zagreus embodying the underworld aspect. And Zagreus is intimately linked with the underworld and the realm of the dead, portrayed as a chthonic deity rather than a celestial one. And unlike Dionysus, Zagreus is often depicted as a more primal and chaotic figure, symbolizing the darker and more enigmatic facets of the psyche. And the Choreos, and thus the Corybantes linked to Apollo, that had been incorporated into the Orphic mysteries, symbolize the start of the integration of the shadow, and with it the rebirth of Dionysus after his initial death through the Titans, which were representing the destructive side of the instinctual and rational aspects of the psyche. And the Corybantes, with their emphasis on rebirth and spiritual purity, were seen as representing the youthful, renewed aspect of Dionysus, who was himself associated with the cycles of growth and decay in nature. And the emergence of Dionysus as the divine child represents the archetype of the child, symbolizing purity, potential, and rebirth. And this archetype often signifies new beginnings, fresh possibilities, and the hope for transformation. Where the worship of Cybele and Rhea, representing the anima, the feminine aspect of the male psyche, or the self for women, is also connected to the Corybantes. Cybele and Rhea embodying the nurturing motherly qualities, where the Corybantes' skill in metallurgy and their mastery of the alchemical properties of fire and earth can be seen as an external reflection of inner alchemy. where the Idiondactyls who guide the Corybantes on their journey of initiation can be viewed as representations of inner wisdom and self-realization. And they, in this sense, represent figures that guide the emerging hero, and with that the young. And when it comes to the Corybantes, as much as they are warriors and integrate their darker side that way to express, past anger, for instance, if we take this in a more current Jungian sense, and with it also cultivate assertiveness and inner empowerment. Next to their ecstatic, joyful practice, the other role of the Corybantes is the nurturing of the divine child, so the young Dionysus. This is as much an important part of healing and wholeness. It is through allowing us to feel this within ourselves, our own unmet needs, childhood traumas, pains of the world, that we not only cultivate true compassion, but also deeper what are deemed virtues. How else are we to be able to show true compassion if not knowing ourselves and our own suffering? To have been able to sit with this part of us with the loving kindness it deserves. And Dionysus as Yahus is the bringer of divine madness and inspiration, who guides souls through the mysteries of life, death, and rebirth. And this aspect highlights his role as a liberator, enabling people to transcend their ordinary consciousness and experience a profound connection to the divine. This rebirth is central to the Orphic teachings, emphasizing that through suffering and transformation, one can achieve a deeper understanding of existence and reconnect with the divine source. In the kingdom of Dionysus, within the Orphic tradition, thus represents the process of integration and spiritual transformation. And symbolically, this is the emergence of the third Dionysus, so Bacchus, which sees the coming together of the celestial nature of Zeus, associated with discipline and the consciousness self-controlled form of libido expression, with the revitalizing, regenerative, transformational, and vital energies from the earthly and chthonic realm associated with the sovereignty goddess, so Persephone. And this stage is characterized by a sense of inner peace, self-acceptance, and a sense of wholeness. So, as Zagreus, where he is dismembered, Dionysus is the scapegoat underworld twin, equated with powers of death, wasteland, drought, darkness, winter, and the underworld, where the reborn Dionysus, as divine child, savior, and new king, is connected to the powers of prosperity, life, health, joy, the fertilizing waters, the renewed sun, and renewed rulership. In one Orphic hymn, we can see this connection as well. The hymn says, "I call upon you, blessed and wildly named Bacchus, the bull-horned redeemer of Nysa, god of the winepress, conceived in fire." And as such, Dionysus Zagreus combines both scapegoat and redeemer into one figure, being not just a figure of death in the underworld, but one that has the ability to be reborn like the sun is reborn every morning, being helioctonic in nature, uniting the celestial and earthly realms, consciousness and unconscious. So, in his dismembered form, as Zagreus, he is Yimu, the one destined to be king who died, but as Dionysus, he is the celestial deity that rises from the underworld. And Dionysus in Orphic myth was also connected to Helios, the sun god, as whom he ventured into the depths of the underworld to retrieve the remains of Zagreus and restore him to life. Proclus himself wrote, "He is called Dionysus because he is carried with a circular motion through the immensely extended heavens, linking him as well to the sun." And as another example, we can see with the Norse Freyr, a vegetation deity linked to fertility and death and rebirth, also similarly being linked to the sun as well, as he is the ruler of rains and the shining of the sun. And he is associated with kingship and horses, fertility, peace, prosperity, fair weather, and good harvest. Yet, he is also the lord of the mount, who oversees and undergoes the life, death, and rebirth cycle, being also a chthonic deity. and is sacrificed for prosperity in connection to the mount or burial place where he is lord of the mount, reflects his role as a deity whose death or sacrifice ensures fertility. Similarly to how Yemu is slain in the Proto-Indo-European myth, becoming lord of the underworld, also tied to the idea of kingship and the sacrifice of cattle and horses. Dionysus, similarly as Zagreus, was dismembered and tied to sacred kingship and the ritual sacrifice of cattle. And both deities, symbolic deaths, ensure the renewal of the cosmic order. Where Freyr's symbolic death each winter and re-emergence each spring corresponds with Dionysus' descent and return. Where in Proto-Indo-European myth there is the dismemberment of Yemu, which is echoed in the myth of Zagreus, where he was eaten by the Titans. And it is this dismemberment that has to be paid for, according to the Orphic tablets, to obtain the forgiveness of the god's mother Persephone, the queen of the underworld, who here symbolizes the unconscious and is an anima figure. And as the mother of Dionysus, Persephone is the mother of mortals, who according to the Orphic myth descend from the Titans who had devoured her son, with Hermes helping Persephone find the scattered parts of her son Dionysus. And it is she that the deceased addresses, calling her mother in the Orphic myths. And the Proto-Indo-European sovereignty goddess is the mother of humans in the same way. And the liberation happens through the symbolic death of the person to relive the dismemberment of the god. And the ritual next to this, death and rebirth, included the ingestion of milk and the initiate becoming like an unweaned child. And this was for them symbolized by the Milky Way as well. It was said about the goddess that she painted the heavens with the milk from her breasts. And the milk for them was symbolic of the food of the newborn and the souls that are reborn to celestial life. And the price to be paid for this rebirth to obtain the forgiveness of Persephone is to face, in psychological terms, the victim child and the pain and emotions that it holds. This itself is the process through which the crime of the Titans is undone, the person being reborn like a nursling kid. And those who participated in the rite would, according to Orphism, dwell with the gods and attain immortality. And this process that they did helped the person return to the childlike state and feel seen and be accepted, to be once more whole, as this allowed them to grow beyond duality and be both pure and wise. And in that sense, Dionysus is thus both the liberator and the dismembered child, which is the victim child, where during his ascent, the reborn Dionysus then encounters Ariadne, the forsaken princess of Crete, left behind by Theseus on the island of Naxos. Theseus and Ariadne had planned to elope together after their triumph. However, on their journey back to Athens, they made a stop on the island of Naxos, where Ariadne was left behind. Dionysus, having observed Ariadne's beauty and charm, fell deeply in love with her at first sight. So he approached her and, captivated by her radiance, convinced her to leave Theseus and become his wife. Ariadne, swayed by the god's divine allure, consented and joined Dionysus. The two then embarked on a joyous journey together, with Dionysus transforming the deserted island of Naxos into a lush paradise for his beloved Ariadne. There, they enjoyed a blissful union, surrounded by the celebrations and festivities that were typical of Dionysus' divine realm. And in some versions of the myth, Dionysus rewarded Ariadne's unwavering love and devotion by placing her among the stars, immortalizing her as the constellation Corona Borealis, the northern crown, in the night sky, where others mention that Dionysus and Ariadne had several children together, further solidifying their sacred bond, where in that version it was said that Ariadne, as his steadfast companion, together with Dionysus thus, ascended to the lofty heights of Olympus, where the gods and goddesses of the pantheon resided, thus symbolizing the harmonious integration of celestial and earthly forces within one divine being. And really what the mysteries are about is also really well reflected within the following by Olympiodorus, the new Platonic philosopher. At the start, our irrational side is like the Titans, destroying our rational and higher self. When we neglect our intuitive intellect, which is hidden within us and connects us to both the lower and higher aspects of ourselves, we become like the Titans, or traitors to ourselves. But when we align ourselves with this intuitive aspect, we become like Bacchus, in control and in harmony with our irrational side. And the idea of the soul's nature being a combination of its connection to the eternal world and divinity, as well as its association with the physical world and susceptibility to passions, reflect the concept of the dual nature of the human psyche in Jungian psychology as well, which is reflected in what Olympiodorus is hinting at. And the Titans here symbolize the destructive, irrational and hyper-rational aspects of the psyche, while Bacchus represents the harmonious integration of the irrational and rational parts of the self. So really a coming together of the more intellectual, intuitive, spiritual and instinctual parts of our being into a singular whole that can coexist in harmony with each other. Which is in the end the purpose of these death and rebirth rites. It is facing and disentangling of the rational and higher self from the projection into the world, requires in that sense also a facing of the unconscious and its contents from a Jungian lens. So that in that sense, our instinctual and unconscious drives don't unconsciously influence and drive our behaviors, and are brought into consciousness and become integrated, thus detangling the rational and instinctual from each other and bringing them into harmony instead of conflict. Olympiodorus echoes the same sentiment within the following excerpt as well. The passive or feminine nature of our irrational part, through which we are bound in body, and which is nothing more than the resounding echo of the soul, requires her own form, which she has lost through titanic dispersion into matter, for every external form or substance is wrought into an identity with its interior substance through an ingenerated tendency, and she needs to be freed from such identification so she can act herself without the external image, having become established within according to the first created life. And from a Jungian lens, this refers to the anima, who similarly can be projected into the world and onto others. And as she is the mediator between the conscious and the unconscious, she plays an important role within that. So it becomes key to become aware of these projections. Both shadow and anima and animus projections. And describing humans as initially like titans then also implies a state where people may be driven by unconscious forces, such as primal instincts and desires. And the notion of titanic dispersion into matter is about the projection of these unconscious elements onto external objects or experiences, leading to attachment and entanglement with materialistic aspects of life. Which is when we project the contents of the unconscious onto the world, akin to Plato's shadows on the cave wall, mistaking these things as reality. And in that way, we do not see the world as it is, but how our mind makes it seem to be. And this does not mean that the world itself is not real, as the material world does exist as a whole. What it means is just that we create stories in our heads about the world, and mistake our thoughts and the projected unconscious content and drives with it, like a virtual layer over the world that is really just in our minds. So instead of seeing other people and various aspects of the world, such as nature, for instance, as it is, we see it through the virtual layer that our mind creates. And as long as we are not aware of these unconscious projections, we can be unconsciously led by them, without understanding their true nature. So we, for instance, are led by unresolved childhood trauma and, pursue relationships that try to resolve this pattern, keeping us stuck in past patterns that can perpetuate our suffering.